What's up, everybody, and welcome back to Unseen Work. As always, I'm your host, Miles Biggs. I'm excited to be with you guys for another awesome interview tonight. Before we get into that, of course, shameless plug, ticking across the screen here. Be sure you check out the book, Unseen Work, and the TED Talk, Unseen Work. Both of them you can check out over my website, milesbiggs.com. Give you some more context for the interview we're about to have, which will be with the one and only Declan Brown tonight, coming to us live from an RV somewhere out on the West Coast. And we'll talk more about that as well. But Declan is one half of the Backpocket Podcast. He's a stand-up comedian. He's also a field engineer. So he's got a full-time job, and amongst all the other things we're going to talk about with him. And we're going to dive into how he got started and that unseen story that we normally don't get insight to. So let's bring him in. Declan, welcome to the show, man.
Hey, man. How's it going?
Going awesome, man. How are you doing?
Great. I'm glad to be a part of the show. I'm super impressed with you already with how you're running your live stream. I mean, as a guy who can barely walk and walk and chew gum at the same time, I mean, this is fantastic. I'm excited, man. Thanks.
Yeah, I'm excited too. I'm excited to get you one-on-one because normally your counterpart Andrew is right next to you, right? And I missed the chairs. First off, the floral chair. You should have brought that in the RV, but it'll be cool just to talk one-on-one. It'll be fun.
I know. I got this, drab-looking facade right behind me in my RV out here in Tonopah, Arizona. Actually, is where I'm residing currently. And speaking of unseen, I would say Tonopah is a very unseen city in the United States. It is definitely something you drive through on your way from Phoenix to, let's say, San Diego or something like that. Okay. But underneath the city of Tonopah is the largest nuclear power plant in the country, providing power to almost all of LA, Phoenix, Utah, Colorado, and New Mexico. So that's actually where I work as a field engineer, and that's why I'm even here. So it's been a wild journey, the last year and a half, 2 years, venturing away from the floral chairs in the studio out in Minneapolis and coming down here to live a little bit in the heat.
Yeah, dude, a lot of it in the heat. Literally the desert, right? It's from snow in Minneapolis to the complete opposite in Arizona.
Pretty much. And I mean, I've really enjoyed it though. I mean, I really can't complain. And I think this is a moment that I'll look back on, and I really think that I'll cherish like this time. I don't know how long I'm going to be living in an RV in the middle of the desert for, but I'm truly living every day one step at a time. And it's been just really fun to like, what's been really eye-opening is just like how the world has changed to work so remote, like Andrew and I, my other half, like talk about productivity when we were together. I mean, the content was flowing, as you know, in 2018, 2019 with us. And we released over 120 podcasts in 2019, sold out our first live show at the end of that year. Had you on as one of the featured guests, which was great. Yeah. 2020 changing things up a little bit with dialing back our amount of episodes that we released, but then just keeping the content at a premium, and then actually launching a new podcast called the Straight Candid Podcast. But like when I got the call in June of last year, kind of right around when the pandemic got serious in Minnesota, I got a call and said, hey, like your day job's trying to take you to Tucson, Arizona. You're going to have to work down there for a while. At the time it was temporary. I was, it's whatever, it's to take the opportunity as it is. Right. Yeah. But what's crazy, and going back to my point of productivity, is like, that was Andrew and I's biggest scare. Like, oh my God, are we really going to have to like figure this out apart? Like, how's this all going to work? How's the podcast going to shake out? How's this and that going to shake out? And I can confidently say, since moving into the RV in November, like we've gotten more done as a corporation between the two of us and beyond, with hiring a couple more interns and different people. We've gotten more done now than we ever have before. And it's crazy to go to sleep at night and still have content being created, podcasts being produced. It's insane, man. And I think this interaction that you and I are having right now, live on not Instagram, LinkedIn, Facebook, and YouTube all at the same time. I mean, streaming 1080p, all from my hotspot. Like, that's that's bananas. We're onto something here. And I think like legitimately, and people have asked me too, working remote's obviously something big from the last year. Everyone knows that, but like, let's start to open up our minds as to like where we can go and how we can put ourselves into these unseen or uncomfortable situations.
Right.
And I think just like the abilities that we have now is endless. And I would recommend traveling outside of what like your typical hometown or your typical workspace, and kind of living on the road because we can work remote and still be as productive as we are.
Yeah. And it's just universally accepted now because there's no other option. It's that old saying about necessity being the mother of invention, right? It's forced everyone to just be like, okay, whether you like Teams or Zooms or whatever you want to do or not, right? That's how you do it. And now people are realizing how awesome it is, how productive you can be, to your point. And a lot of people don't want to go back to the old normal, right? So I agree.
Yeah, not at all. And it's just interesting, man. I don't see, like I obviously the goal for myself is to try and take Backpocket full time as we try and produce more podcasts and bring more ideas into our hub. But like, I really think utilizing this remote type of work is going to be like pretty much what we rely on going forward. Yeah. I don't really see a reason why we would like dial in on like an office or something,
Right. Yeah. Yeah. So we're touching on a lot of what you're doing now, right? So people that are watching, if you guys have questions or comments for Declan, I want to make sure I don't forget to say this. Leave them wherever you're watching this, on LinkedIn, on Facebook, on YouTube. I can pull them in to this conversation. I'll bring my friend the Duck in. Here's an example. That Duck could be you, and you can interview Declan with me. So I just want to make sure you guys know that. If you're curious about anything as we're talking, pop it in there, and we'll have some fun bringing some user comments, questions into the mix. So my first question, really, we talked about what you're doing, right? The podcast. You mentioned it's a corporation as well as like a hobby, right? Like most podcasters would be. You're hiring people. You're producing other podcasts. You're doing live shows in person with one of the date night podcasts, right? So that's all what you're doing now. But if you wind the clock back, how did it all start? How did the podcast get started? What are those unseen moments that nobody knows about? I think from your dorm room in college, right? Like bring us back to the birth of the Backpocket.
Yeah, absolutely. So the birth really begins. I'll tell the extended story, but one of my favorite parts was actually in 2016, right around the election. Tensions are high. A little bit before that, Andrew, my co-host, and I, played football together. We're pretty decent friends at the time, and we're listening to Pardon My Take, which is the number one sports podcast in the country still to this day. They started right in March of 2016. But anyways, we were listening to that show and we saw these two average guys basically take over the sports industry through podcasts and Barstool. And we, right in the heart of the election season, I get broken up with because I vote for the wrong president. And legitimately, I get broken up with within minutes of telling my girlfriend at the time that I voted for Hillary Clinton, and she broke up with me, and I was like in this shock. And I always describe these moments whenever you break up with someone or some sort of big chunk of time is just kind of entirely removed out of your life. I call it the set the world on fire mentality. So like I had all these creative juices flowing, and I was like, you know what? Why don't we start like a podcast, Andrew? What do you think about this? Like, we can make it this politics podcast, blah, 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 blah. It would be super cool to take over the industry just as two average guys, just like Pardon My Take. So we were interested in just the podcast in general. We take 6 weeks off of school during, the Christmas and January break. And we tell our moms about it. Our moms are like, please, for the love of God, do not release a polarizing podcast with you two on a topic that you know nothing about. So we're like, okay, got to listen to your moms. I've always been personally a pro mom guy. I don't think if you were to scroll through my tweets back to when I started my Twitter in 2012, I don't think you would see a single tweet bashing a mom, hating on moms, having wrong words or misinformation regarding moms. I've always been strong pro mom. So with that, I mean, we pretty much agree with our moms. We're like, we can't do that. So we went in February 7th of 2017. We went to Best Buy and bought a podcast mic. But we were like, okay, we really don't really know what else we're going to do here. But we do know that we're average guys. We do know that we may want to have some conversations with people. So fast forward, for that first year, it was really just like, how do you create a podcast? Like at that time, it wasn't like you uploaded to what they call our favorite hosting website is anchor.fm, which is the free source to upload a podcast. Basically anywhere you upload to this website pushes it to Spotify, iTunes, or Apple Podcasts, and anywhere else, like 13 or 14 other platforms.
Yeah.
We didn't really have that at the time. We had to host it from our website and then try and apply to get on Spotify and Apple Podcasts and all this stuff. So, that was like a struggle in itself for the first 7-8 weeks. And we didn't know what we were even talking about, blah, blah, blah. So at the end of the day, like we came into this thing and we're like, okay, we're ordinary average guys, but like there's definitely something extraordinary here with just having undistracted conversations for an hour. So, it started with our friends, and then it's moved on to professors, and then it moved on to people on social media. And we meet guys like yourself through all these different connections. And we always honed in this idea of, what's your average quality? And what's ornately your average quality is essentially something that you care about deeply, that you're trying to work on every single day. At the end of the day, you're not really that great at it. There's always going to be someone better than you. But you're not terrible at it because you care about it, and you continue to seed and water that plant. So we would ask that and try and take it on a little bit lighthearted and comedically. And then the name of the name Backpocket comes from this idea of like, you and I having this conversation, there's something that a listener can take, put that in their back pocket and go use in their own life. So like how I brand myself, how I my conversations with people, Andrew and I's conversations with people, the content we put out, the new podcasts we create, all this stuff, whether it's entertaining and makes you laugh, whether it's emotional and makes you cry, whether it's informative and makes you think and you learn something new. I don't care what it is. I want that one thing or that two things that you can pick out of a conversation or a piece of content we put out and put that in your back pocket. So we really started as a podcast, and we really, really honed that in for the last 3 years. And I believe you and I started really connecting in 2018, maybe 19.
But I think it was 18 because I found when I started my podcast around the same time as you guys, and I just went on Instagram, typed in podcast, and followed everybody. And I was just like, what are people doing? And what ideas can I get? And I remember seeing the GoPro mounted video corner of the room. You guys, it was like a cheesy like Applebee's, or like crap all over the wall, right? And it was just time lapse of you guys doing it and setting stuff up. And I just DM'd you guys and was like, hey, I'm starting a podcast too. Like in that learning phase, how are you doing it? What do you recommend? And we just started going back and forth that way. Totally. And then I just started picking off your guests, people you guys started having on.
Which is I would
listen to them and then be like, hey, I heard you guys on the Back Pocket. I think you'd work for mine too. And before you know it, people thought I lived in Minnesota because I was interviewing all you guys out in Minnesota. It was pretty funny.
Oh, it's amazing. I mean, and that's another thing, right? Because we started in Minneapolis, and now I live in Arizona, working remotely here. Trying to grow the brand on the West Coast here, and Andrew's still working in Minneapolis, dominating that sandbox still. But like I think I commend you still to this day for tapping into that Twin Cities network, and you could probably speak on the dividends far more than I can, but like the fact that you end up booking a flight out to a networking event called Link and Drink and are welcomed with open arms by the community. And like, I think that is just a testament to your hard work and just your genuine personality. And like you just wanting to get to know people's story. I think it's just the coolest thing. And, seeing that in your book and now in this like show that you're doing, like there's so many cool things that you've done that probably goes unseen, but I just want to commend you on that because you've been a part of our journey for the last 2-3 years almost, and have seen the growth for sure. But I just want to throw it back at you too, man. We've seen the growth just as much.
Yeah, thanks, man. Appreciate that. It's been fun. And so I want to go back to this. I had this ready to go, and you walked right into it. You kept saying average, wildly average, ordinary average guys. It's something that always made me laugh because it was like a little self-deprecation, right? Like you kind of poking fun before other people can poke fun at you. It's like that Eminem rap battle moment, right? Where you're doing it before your enemies can. But I'd love to know where that came from. You said it. We're just average guys. You listen to average guys. Did you just fall into it, or was it just a very thought out kind of marketing ploy that you're going to turn it on its head, this phrase?
I mean, it's totally fell into it because that's what we are. And I think we got the term wildly average from our football coach, who would go through his hit sheet of like the scout team. So like before we would play an opponent on Saturday, you would get like the list of all the players and you'd watch the players and see how good they are. And then like, try and strategize against them. And there's obviously players that are really good. And you got to be like, okay, we're going to double team wide receiver number 10 here because he's obviously the fastest guy in the field and they try and get him the ball all the time. Quarterback, he kind of stinks though. They're not going to be really able to get him the ball. So we're going to pass rush the shit out of him. Right. But then, their tackle, their right guard, wildly average, like right in the middle, but it's somewhere, like he would just go off on anybody who was wildly average. So Andrew and I had that tag forever. And it's really evolved because it can be taken so many different ways. So it's tough to like really try and pinpoint what it really means, right? I mean, you could look at it very comedically or self-deprecating and be like, I'm an average cook, or you can associate that with the like the word average with a synonym of like terrible. I'm an average cook. I'm a terrible cook. Or
right.
I'm average at parallel parking or ironing my shirts. Like very simple actions. But then you have people when you ask them their average qualities or what they're wildly average at, and they say, I'm an average listener. Like and then they attack it very deep. They try and go into something that really irks at them. So what Andrew and I are kind of currently trying to do is first and foremost create content around it. So if you are on Instagram ever and want just a good fresh stream of all types of different kind of curated content, you can follow our wildly average page, and you can get basically a plethora of content to basically either be inspired with, make you laugh, make you think. We're still trying to niche down and figure out, what makes the most sense. But nonetheless, our initiative with it is to push this idea of like, look, our average quality or what we're wildly average at is truly something that we care about deeply and we're trying to get better at every day. And we're never really in the humility aspect that comes from your average quality is really what we're trying to hone in on, because I think that's just one of the biggest driving factors or the engines behind what we do. It's just, if you can constantly look at something and focus on something that you deeply care about, but you don't look at it as like, I'm the best at it, or I think I can do this better than anybody else, you're always going to have an upward trajectory, what we like to call, you're always going to have the up and to the right mentality.
Right. And if you're doing that while you're unseen, right, to go into my motif here, then when people finally see you, they're going to see that the improvement on the wildly average, right? And it's so many people just want to be perfect right from the get-go, but it doesn't work that way, right? It's you got to toil away in the averageness when nobody's watching, so that when the camera's on, no one knows what it took to get you there, because they just assume you've always been that good because you seem like a natural, right?
Right. And that's why I really like what you're doing with unseen work, because it really attacks everything from like this behind the scenes niche where like people are fascinated by what goes on behind the scene. Like they really want to know that you have a side job that you work 65 hours at a week. And that's kind of what keeps your financial pocket full. And that's kind of what fuels the stuff that we're kind of blasting off, because people aren't stupid, right? Like they know that the Instagram tiles you post every week, as good as you may look, is not necessarily the reality of your life. And you even personally know that, but like no one's like trying to put their worst step forward. Right. But what I like about it is just like, there's this new wave, right when we really started the podcast, I would say this really started to pick up, but I think it's always been there. And it's this idea of just like being authentic and transparent and putting that out there, right? To a certain degree, right? Like I guess I may be a little bit too transparent. Like I'm a guy, if you follow me on Instagram, like I throw my ass cheeks out there, like my back door's hanging out for everyone to see. And, as my mom she may, be like, all right, Declan, like, what the hell are we doing here? This is an embarrassment to like the Brown family legacy. It still attacks it from the idea of just like, be yourself, and utilize social media and utilize like connections, especially if you're trying to put yourself out there and create a lifestyle from it. Like, be yourself. Don't try and hide anything. Don't try and sell something to yourself that even you don't believe. And just that aspect of like doing that over and over again is just going to fine tune yourself as an actual human being. And I think that's like what's great about like unseen work is like being able to actually talk about these things, giving a platform simply for that. It just makes a lot of sense, man. And it's been really fun to kind of look in the mirror and do kind of this idea of like the mirror image mentality. Like your brand, your company, your passion is never going to be as good. It's never going to be any better than how you are currently. And that's truly something that I believe and truly something that like Andrew and I have totally hinged on for the past 2-3 years.
So you touched on something. Before I forget, I'm going to pivot off of what you just said, and that's a good point too. But you mentioned football. Yep. Completely different than podcasting, right? But football kind of fed the wildly average in the podcast. It's a perfect example of something I call passive unseen work.
Oh.
So I've got 3 different types. Run through them real quick for people watching if you're not sure. There's generational unseen work, which is the idea that everything that your parents did, both seen and unseen, or your grandparents, go back as far as you want, is your unseen work. You don't see it. You don't know everything that they did, but it affects everything that they did with you and how you show up. So it's like their foundation for you, right? So that's
you can only see as far as the shoulders you stand on.
Right.
That's not the quote at all, but like that's the impetus, right?
Yeah. And then active unseen work is like your traditional going from point A to point B, right?
Mm-hmm.
Take my book. People see that I wrote a book and published a book, but they don't see like me deciding to publish a book and then everything it took to hit publish, right? It's
writing the book probably like 2 a.m. while your kid's crying.
It's crazy. Yeah.
That kind of stuff.
But passive unseen work is what you touched on. So the idea that unrelated things can passively compound in like the background and then result in something new that you never could have really planned for. But then in hindsight, you totally see how all the dots are connected and it brought you to this spot. So for me, I was a swimmer. And so I can see in sports how everything I did was swimming and just like literally head underwater for hours forged a level of mental toughness for me that then I'd take into everything. And so while the average is kind of a passive unseen work example of some branding for your podcast, but I'm curious how else you see football or anything else as an example as passive unseen work to what you're doing right now.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, man. A few things come to mind. The first would obviously be football, and I'll touch on that briefly, but it's seriously one of the more impactful things in terms of like my work ethic and like my understanding of like committing to a team and being like an unselfish member and being a part of something where you're trying to build, grow, and commit to something that's bigger than yourself. And I think the humility and the type of grit it takes to pull something off like that is tough. For myself, I decent athlete in high school, all right athlete in college. Currently, unbelievable specimen. I mean, I have better hips than I ever have. I can run faster than I ever have. I feel in better shape. I'm in the best shape of my life. I got a good fighting weight. I'm about a 183.6 approximately.
About
6'2". I mean, I'm feeling great. But, getting recruited to go from high school football to play college football at a now Division I level program in the University of St. Thomas, like the competition's tough. And I can kindly say for 4 years, I rode the bench and I played scout team. And it wasn't until my senior year that I had an invitation to camp, meaning I cracked the top 4 in the depth chart for my specific position. Now, I wasn't getting a scholarship necessarily to play football. I wasn't there because I had all my schooling paid for and everything like that. I wasn't there because I was promised anything. I was simply there because I saw an opportunity. And I saw something that was bigger than me that I thought I could be a part of. And the commitment to staying in college football, playing on with the University of St. Thomas, and going to a national championship our sophomore year, and all these glitz and glamour things. It's like my memories are like the weight room at 6 a.m. with Andrew. Right. And Andrew was a scout teamer for 3 of his 4 years, and then got some playing time his senior year, but. Like I literally played 11 downs of college football in 4 years. And people are like, well, that sounds like a waste of time. But like, this is the passive unseen work that built my work ethic and grit and determination into what it is today. When I'm in a tough situation now, it doesn't pale in comparison to the kind of emotions and disappointment maybe that I felt being on the scout team going against All-American linemen, and I'm a outside linebacker, like these types of moments where you get beat up over and over and over again, but you have no option except for to like get back up and do it again. And there are many times where I was like, it ain't worth it. I just want to quit, be a normal college kid, get high majority of days and like just be an engineer, but like, I just knew that if I quit, I would regret it. And I knew that how much I loved the game and how much I loved my teammates and how much that meant to me and how much I could value that. So like, it challenges your why often. And when I'm in these situations, in current situations now where I'm like, I've never been in this situation literally. And I can definitely, like, Andrew and I will look at each other and laugh at it, be like, wow, this is kind of a nuts situation to like even have to deal with. But like, we can do it. We can do anything. We can literally do anything and accomplish it. And so that kind of experience of that unseen work of football definitely had an influence. The other thing I would say, like, because I tie the majority of the unseen work as like legitimate hard work. Like you just gotta get it done,
right?
And stay afloat and kind of just like keep yourself going. Focus on get like 1% better every single day, because you're never gonna love the situation you're currently in, right? But like you're definitely gonna need to push through whatever is right in your face to continue to where you want to be, So one of the things that I kind of laugh about, but like really set me on a good page is I've basically been in construction. Like I've worked construction as my main job since I was 18. I worked as a laborer in a shop, like a construction shop, right after, like 2 days after I graduated. I won a state championship in lacrosse. Went to graduation the next day on a Saturday. Sunday, probably like partied my ass off and went to grad parties. And then Monday, I showed up first day at this laborer at this shop of a construction company. And they said, hey, we're going to be pouring 1,000 yards of concrete this year in the yard. And you're going to have to learn how to operate a forklift. You're going to clean a bunch of trucks. Like you're going to be doing all these different things. And it was like, be here at 6, leave at 4 every day. And as an 18-year-old, I had never done anything close to that, but having to like physically wake up, drive, get there, or like go to workouts because I was going to play football first semester freshman year. That summer, man, I mean, not only did I make a lot of money and that like helped me survive like all of my first year of college, but like that summer, just strictly hard work, working with like people who've been to prison before and like aren't like this job isn't like the first thing that they would sign up for as a career in their 30s, working around those people, the physical work that was involved, the accountability, the sheer like actual like labor and like learning how to like be efficient at like pouring concrete. Like you suck at it first and it's like a safety hazard, and then like by the time you're done with it, you're like, I'm actually like forming up the curb and all the different stuff and like actually learning how to do it, shooting grade, whatever it is. But like that first summer, man, was so impactful because it scared me straight to a certain degree. It helped me become financially stable. And it also made me realize what incredible opportunity I had in front of me, going to college, becoming an engineer, and the ability to just like work my ass off to get exactly to go and accomplish the simple goal of like graduating from college.
Yeah. It's like you got a glimpse of, what could be the rest of your life if you didn't take it seriously. Right.
10-4. It definitely scared me straight. Now I definitely had my like time of partying and like had an absolute blast in college. But like it was that summer that I really needed to like really set a good like baseline of like, this is what my accountability needs to be to myself. And I think that is something like I don't really ever talk about just because it's not sexy to say like, I'm not a laborer, but I was cleaning the TV right before this, and I had some glass cleaner in the sink, and I was like, I used to use the shit out of glass cleaner cleaning trucks. I know exactly how to use glass cleaner. It's like the best thing ever.
That's funny.
But it's just funny, one of those different things, but definitely one of those generational unseen work. And I would say generationally, with my parents, and how hard they work and how hard we grind, with my parents raised 5 kids, every single one of them went to a private Catholic high school. That cost $10,000 a year when I went there. It's now $17,000 a year for each kid.
Wow.
Then you factor in the fact that we all played sports. 3 of the 5 are college athletes, or one's about to be, but me and my sister were college athletes. And then we all went to college. A lot of money. That's $250,000 a year just to fund kids. And my parents worked multiple jobs to make that happen. Still do to this day. And that kind of love and that kind of platform, again, that level of accountability that you kind of just get set on right away.
Right.
Now it's huge, man.
Yeah. And so it's no wonder that you see what you're doing as normal, just don't know anything else at a certain extent. Yeah.
That's right.
I've gotten into podcasting. I know my experience with podcasting and what I've now seen it fuel so many other things. You got podcasting, started a production arm of the podcasting side, which we could talk about. So you've got all these things. How do you find podcasting has supported skill you build on and other things now, right? Even your day job. Mm-hmm. How have you seen it kind of seep into all these other areas of your life?
Well, I mean, first off, communication. I've gotten very organized with my thoughts, and I'm definitely a guy who thinks before. So I mean, the idea of just being able to actually communicate and listening to people is huge. My day job where I'm working to listen to these people, and I have to really understand them and know how to communicate with them. Same thing with a podcast guest. Same thing with a stand-up set that I'm doing. And same thing with employees and everything. There's an aspect that podcasting has helped with. Now on the flip side of that, while I sit down and legitimately have coffee with, I mean, we're at episode 300, kidding me? We've been able to have such a cool perspective simply by and be genuinely curious. Those two things right away forgave me. Now, the other aspect of it, and it kind of goes back to this accountability thing, is I've listened to every single podcast back after we release it. So I've listened to every single podcast, and I think that's part of the reason I've tried to fine tune that craft over and over again. And what you find is and I'm sure you can attest to this, is when you say something on the podcast, then you don't want to do it, then don't say it. That idea of constant, that kind of thing, where it's when you're focused on that kind of branding aspect of it, really makes you ask yourself why? Why am I doing this a lot? And applying that to your life. And when you hear great stories like yourself, like the story of Miles Biggs, that kind of perspective makes you ask okay, I can put in my back pocket and use my own life, which again goes back to the brand and everything like that. But just the podcast in general, I would say communication, the idea of networking, and the idea of just loop of self-awareness.
Yeah. I think that's something of confidence, because I've found that, right? It's when you harness all three, you're comfortable everywhere. It's you don't have a discomfort zone. You walk in a room, you're what's up, everybody? Who are we talking to? Because at this point, you've met almost every type of person there is in this world that you can run into. Everybody is pretty similar at the end of the day. And once you figure that out and you realize that, you just show up, be the coolest thing for podcasting, because then you crush job interviews, interviewing other people, talking to your boss, whatever it might be, right? And then you're so good at that. And you're well, 305 podcasts, right?
Yeah, the number's one thing, but I also think kind of going at it from a total, everyone's the same, but we're all, but I would also challenge, we're all different. And I feel we start to amplify those, oh, okay, my boss who's super intimidating is also just a dad,
right.
And when you start to hire up billionaires all talking about some corporate stuff that you feel you shouldn't be in the room, if you just remember that they're all dads on Saturday and they're all spending time gardening or biking or watching college basketball, do those things, then you're never gonna apologize for or feel intimidated when you attack it from that standpoint. And so I always try and look at it from the standpoint too of like, there's so much value that everyone has to offer. It's just what you have to be willing to kind of give them the time of day to really show you what they have. And I think that's what goes back to this whole listening aspect. It's like, dude, just be a genuine human. Be a genuine human with everyone that crosses your path, and you'll be so surprised as to what people are willing to give you, because you never know that one person who just needs to be asked, how are you doing today? Or what's going on, man? Or like, just any sort of thoughtful question where they know you're listening. Like, I think that is one of the more powerful things about like that confidence aspect of podcasting, where like you and I will walk into a room and we'll be able to talk everyone's ear off, but we're also like genuinely there, and we're genuinely listening, and we're genuinely participating, aware of and practicing at almost at all times.
Yeah, I think that's a great point, because I know a lot of people that assume I love to talk about myself. Well, the podcast isn't really about me. It's about me sharing somebody else's story. Like, I'm on here asking questions, but this isn't about me. It's about you right now, right? This every now and then, because you do this too. I agree, like listening, but then asking a question and not just immediately jumping into the next question that you have in your mind, right? Actually listening and letting them speak. Waiting
or just like asking the question, like asking a question just so you can get asked it right back because you want to talk,
Right. Oh yeah.
I hate when people do that.
That's funny. So you've done a lot, and there's bound to have been some failures along the way. And so this is my favorite kind of lens to look at unseen work. Is I really feel like the way we fail when no one is watching really will dictate how you fail when everyone's watching, and how you get back up, which you mentioned. So I've got two sides to failure. One is called the F.L.I.P, and one's called the F.L.O.P. So we'll start with the F.L.I.P, which is fail, learn, improvise, pivot. So how can I kind of improvise and then ultimately pivot and attack again, right? So do you have an instance where you were able to flip podcasting or production, or you got so much to choose from? What's a good Declan flip?
A good Decky flip. Well, I mean, I feel like Decky flip is like, that's like me all the time, honestly. One would be like when I first moved into this RV, you have to clean out your sewage like every 3 or 4 days. So I definitely like how to drain my poop water out of my RV. Like, I did a deplorable job at it, and I had no idea how to do it. It was not really taught. So I failed many times. I actually was the first place I parked was in an RV lot. So it was a boy amongst a lot of RV men. Learned by asking questions like, hey, can you help me out with my poop water? Improvising now would be more or less, now that I know like how the process works, what's the best way to actually accomplish this? So I've been improvising on like when I should be draining my sewage, how I should be handling my sewage. Like, there's a lot of, you got to make sure for all the RV owners out there, you got to make sure you have like a good amount of just like kitchen sink water to flush out. They call it like your poop water, which is the black water. So I've learned, if I want to drain my poo water, I need to, probably think of that a day in advance, close my kitchen sink water, let that fill up a little bit, and then the next day I can drain everything all at once and then have a clean flush. Now, I've also had to devise a system where, shit runs downhill. So, you got to devise a system that takes everything from a high elevation to a low elevation without the wind blowing over your actual pipeline and all this other stuff. So that's been a lot of my improvising, and then just like the general pivoting. So I would say the F.L.I.P and the progress that I have made, draining my sewage has been just a fun learning experience, because it's like not something that I personally want to spend a lot of time on, right? Like, I have a lot of things, and you may shoot me for this because, I have stand-up comedy flips, I have podcast flips, I have all these different things, but like, I shit you not, the thing that humbles me the most is because I've never done anything like it in my life, and having to like be in that state of shock and like literally implement those types of like tactics of like literally ask someone else how to do it, figure it out for yourself eventually, and then like create a process that works for you. Like that, I've had to do that almost more for my sewage than I have for the majority of other things. I kid you not.
That's funny. Well, it goes back to something you said earlier, just about what's the word? You're kind of reminds me of your football story, right? You just kind of learn what you're capable of, right? Like whether you're standing up on stage and you have to like recover from nobody laughing at your joke in comedy, or deign yourself to go like tail between your legs, say, "Excuse me, sir, will you help me drain my poop water?" Right? And just realize that you don't know everything. It's okay to ask for help. And there's a lot of great lessons there.
Yeah, the humility engine, things in life that you're going to do that's going to humble you. And it's up to you for you to flip it into a positive. And I think that's one thing that I try and focus on as many times as possible. It's like, look, there's a lot of things that people are going to ask you to do or get thrown into your life or whatever it is. They're gonna, like, bad things are going to happen. And it's up to you to flip almost everything that you're thrown into a positive.
Yeah. And we got a good comment came through. Sort of that. Tom Reddy, watching over on LinkedIn. What's up, Tom? Thanks for joining in with here. Putting in the grind, no matter what the unseen is, to make an impact and hit greater success levels, you have to put in the grind. So that's right.
Absolutely. Thank you, Tom. And what a LinkedIn comment today. I mean, He's got the Hanes undershirt, no bacon neck, and it looks like he's in a nice backyard with a floral background, and he's got a touch of gray going on.
Look at that. Like Tom, you said, everybody's a dad at the end of the day, right?
Everyone's just a dad doing their kooky stuff on Saturday. Perfect example. Gotta give it up for Tom here. So
if you don't flip that poop water scenario, right? I'll hopefully your example here isn't sewage again. You flop. And so the flop is when you fail, you lie, you obsess, and you pretend. So this is, I love the visual of the flop, right? Think about it face down. This is excuse making, rationalizing, kind of sweeping it all on the rug, pretending it didn't happen. And I have obsessed in there because I really feel like when you fail and then you lie to yourself about it or you lie to others about it, you end up obsessing about the fact that you're lying about it and kind of like that you failed, even though you're saying you didn't, right? That whole mental game you play with yourself until you just kind of pretend it didn't happen. And then you ultimately make that same mistake again someday, right? So I know you're probably mostly a flip guy because you do a lot of things, but do you have a moment of a flop where you weren't able to turn it around?
I think I have moments of flop daily.
Okay.
And I think those moments of flop come at times of tension, at times of when the expectations don't necessarily line up. And ultimately, wherever the flop occurs and wherever you are currently pretending does not necessarily mean it's the end of the world. So I want to start with that because I flop every day. I will fail. I will lie to myself. I will obsess over like whatever that situation is. No, it's okay. It's totally fine. It's not that big of a deal. Let's just keep moving. It's whatever. But like those flops live inside you. They don't go away like the sewage water. They don't go away like you drain out your poo water in your RV. They stay with you. So I think it goes back to this accountability aspect of like, hey, look, I'm flopping right now, 1,000,000,000% flopping, and I need to get out of it. So I just want to set that framework before I get into some of my flops.
Sure.
So now some of my flops. I would say one of my flops that I have that I'm still kind of going through currently is and this is a funny example, but like I really like to create video content and I like to challenge myself on the appearance of it, and I take on these new activities. And so a good example is me and 14 other guys with 3 GoPros, 2 Sony DSLRs, which are like nicer cameras for people who don't know. We had like literally 7 or 8 people capturing content. One of my personal dreams, a big skier, grew up in Colorado, is to create a ski documentary. We went for 5 days, skied 5 days, had a blast, got tons of content, and I'm the one who wants to pick up the bill for creating the video because I want to do it. And I know this is like deeply inside me, but like I'm currently flopping on the production of this video. Like could not be flopping more, to be honest. And a lot of that comes from just like my time management, but also kind of like this idea of like, I definitely like don't want to do it at times, and I don't want to create it, and I'm like stuck a little bit, and I'm a little overwhelmed. So I'm currently in the I'm probably like somewhere in between obsessed. I'm probably in the pretend right now. Like, oh yeah, I'll get it done. So like, I'm really trying to kind of critique and figure out how the hell I get out of this flop. Cause I'm kind of, to be honest.
Sure.
And I think how I rationalize, and I would not say this is pretending. This is not pretending. Here, 1 sec. I'm going to hit record on my camera real quick.
Yeah, it's fine.
I'm not gonna say that I have it figured out whatsoever, and how I rationalize and take this anxiety down a notch, and this is kind of how I think I move forward through flops, is like I just need to find a new solution. And I know it's not the end of the world. Like I don't have a due date on this like I normally would for a podcast or maybe something to do that actually has a legitimate due date. This is very much an internal thing and just me being like kind of accountable to my friends and then like creating something that I really like around it and not taking myself too seriously around behind it and knowing it's not the end of the world. I've never really created a piece of content that lasts more than 2 minutes, literally. And then I know that sounds kind of crazy, but if you think about like
2 minutes, it's a long time for video. So yeah,
a long time for 5 days worth of footage. That I have probably 7 or 8 minutes worth of content. I don't really necessarily have a story to tell besides just showing the tomfoolery that we got into. And I think that's where I'm stuck, right? But I think it's this constant, and I also want to say like the obsession part's not bad either. The obsession part's not bad either because I'm obsessing over how the hell I'm gonna get out of this flop. Like I don't necessarily have an answer, but I can't stop freaking thinking about it. I can't. And I know this is all surrounded around like a dumb video, like recap video for my friends on the ski trip, but like I take it so seriously. Like I want this thing to be actually presentable and I want this thing to actually be good. And I think I get impatient with myself. If I don't do it the day I set myself that I set it on my schedule, then I'm like, I don't care enough. I can't do this. This isn't part of what I meant to do. Meanwhile, I'm looking like down the road and asking myself like what I want to do in the future. And like on my mood board is like, I want to make a documentary. Well, do you think you can make a goddamn documentary if you can't put together a 7-minute ski clip for your friends? Like these are the kind of internal dialogues that I'm having of like, dude, figure it out. But also like, it's not that big of a deal. Right. And I think throwing the dart is far more than where you hit on the dartboard, because the more reps you get at freaking doing the thing, the better you're going to get. You're going to get closer to the bullseye eventually. And I think the fear behind throwing the dart happens way too often in my life, especially with this pertaining to this specific situation.
It's funny that voice you're saying. To me, I think of the flop like if anybody's ever run. So I've done a couple half marathons.
Nice.
And you get to like mile 7 and you start thinking to yourself, I could stop, right? Like, don't really need to finish. Like you start to like play that game with yourself. And then you kind of start yelling at yourself. Like you said, like, come on, what the heck? You paid all this money. You trained for this long. Like you've got to finish. And it's like the devil on your shoulder, angel on your shoulder kind of motif there. But that's what I love about the flop stories, because you can always flip the flop, right? And then you get a total beach guy on you because I love the beach. Flip flops. You can't move forward if you don't flip and flop each step, right? You flip and you flop.
Oh,
so nice. I feel like they're just intertwined for sure. And,
well, they totally are. I mean, it's just it's all based on how you want to look at it, you know. And it also comes back to this idea of like how real do you want to get with yourself? how are you going to have the honest conversation, or are you literally going to keep pretending and pushing it under the rug and suppressing until one day it legitimately Mount Vesuvius is on your ass?
Yeah, because it will happen.
Because it will happen. So I think it goes back to this idea of like the unseen work that comes into play, where it's like I've been in those situations where I've been tested on my accountability, and sometimes I do great, sometimes I stink at it. But like at the end of the day, I've seen so much benefit from like this consistent cycle of self-awareness. And I've seen had all these different conversations with people who've gone through something very similar, and like they've accomplished it with like truly just pushing forward and figuring it out as they go. And so those kind of other stories or those kind of other things really put me at ease, and something in those types of conversations I hold in my back pocket, in the back of my head, like, hey, it's not the end of the world. We're going to get this thing done. Don't worry about deadlines as much, more worry about your actual process, and you're going to like the product at the end. So actually me bringing this F.L.O.P up has actually kind of helped me like naturally walk through this and like actually kind of hold myself a little more accountable as to like why I'm feeling this way, and just be like far more accepting of like, dude, if I have an hour to put at this, like I know how freaking busy I am, but like if I have an hour to put at this, like let's take advantage, Sure. So it's been interesting to say the least, but I think like at the end of the day, I'm so damn grateful that like my flop that I can think of right now that's like currently on top of mind constantly is like a ski trip video that I have like sitting on my laptop.
Yeah, it could be like, way worse than that.
How grateful am I to even be in this situation, man? So
that's awesome.
I'm sure I'm pissing people off too, because I'm like, that's my flop. But
hey,
that's
you're ragging on Tom and you didn't piss him off. He actually came back with a question. So he's
all right, here we go, Tom. Can I read this?
The advantages and disadvantages are between running your own podcast or as a regular guest on an already established podcast?
Okay, so advantages is obviously like you get to talk, like you're good at talking, and you can kind of feel like there's kind of like these little keys that you will give me or I will give you on like finishing a conversation, letting Miles know that it's right for the next question. There's like these different types of like almost telepathic communications that you and I are having without even really knowing it. I would say that's a total advantage because like we've both been in the podcasting industry and we both know that. Disadvantages, probably I just want to ask you a bunch of questions and like I want to spin it back on you. But at the end of the day, like I would say it's just all a conversation, like just be a human, be genuine, listen to the person across from you. And don't worry necessarily about that next question or maybe where this like direction of the podcast is going, because at the end of the day, it's a conversation, and me, you, and Tom are hanging out watching this live on LinkedIn.
Yeah. And I'd add to that. I would say, Tom, if you're weighing out, like, do you start your own podcast to get your message out, or do you just be a guest on other people's podcasts to get your message out, and what are the pros and cons?
Oh, sure.
So, if it's your own podcast, you get to control the message more. It's your show. So you can decide, are you interviewing other people, or are you just getting on there solo talking? Are you going to have people interview you? Like, it's your show. It can be whatever you want it to be. Huge advantage. Disadvantage would be sometimes if you want to do an interview show, it's not always going to be about you, right? So depending on what you want to get out of it, it all depends. But then being on somebody else's podcast is awesome, I think, because you get to see how somebody else does it and learn what else is going on versus what you're living in all the time. Totally. And then you get to expand all the networking you were talking about, Declan, like meet new people, be exposed to the way they think, meet the people they know, get in rooms with folks you normally wouldn't be in because you're on their show, they're on yours. It's just a lot can happen. So ultimately, I think you got to do both.
Totally do both. I mean, there's such a balance to it. Like you're as a podcast host, your main job is to listen and facilitate. And then as a guest, it's more about you talking and giving kind of information, context, entertainment, just genuinely being yourself, like kind of putting yourself on that stage. So it's two totally different sides of the coin. Both fun, both necessary, and definitely should be balanced. Yeah.
So I'll ask you one more, like, I guess, line of questions here. And then I'll let you ask me something if you want to flip it on me. I'm cool with that. Let you scratch your itch. So I've been workshopping this new idea, Declan. I'm calling it Point C, for lack of a better phrase. when we talk about goal setting, a lot of it's point A to point B, right? People talk about that typical goal setting. Like my book example or a podcast. I want to start a podcast. Okay, great. That's your point A. There's a very specific do these things. A lot of it's unseen before you show up at point B and you have your podcast, right? Point C is what I'm calling this, right? When you navigate the oh shit moment of, oh my gosh, I actually did it. I have a podcast, right? I edited the video. The documentary's done and I submitted it to the film festival. And now it's like, well, what do I do next? Like you put so much time into getting from point A to point B. You get to point B and you look around and you go, this is it. Or where do I go from here? How do I make this better? And like, how do you keep the love alive, right? And you've been able to do that a lot with the back pocket, like the way you guys kind of add point C, D, E. So what's your thoughts on this? How do you go from point B to point C? Like navigating that oh shit moment?
Well, I would say having the mindset of looking at point C as to what your next point A is going to be, and what you learn from the process of point A to point B should give you a good implication of what your next point A should be. So your point C is almost like a reflection period or this pseudo gray area where you're deciding where your next point A is. And I think reflect on like, okay, through this process of going from starting a podcast to putting out the actual episode, what parts did I like? What parts did I not like? Do I even want to do this again? Type thing. Or right. I won Best Documentary at Sundance Music Festival or Film Festival, and now I want it, and it's like, great. What did I learn? What I like? What, like, you're never going to go back and make this. You're never going to go back and record the same exact podcast. You're never going to do a lot of those things. More so, you're going to try and look to see what parts you can use that you really, really liked. So like, I like to use this example of like working out, you know, like you try and you put together the 6-week plan, you go through the diet, you go through like the actual work, and then you go through it at the very end. It's like, well, you got healthy for 6 months. Right. So like find the things you like to work out at and like to do, and these activities you can constantly go back to make yourself feel fulfilled. Those things should be the things that you should be deciding and garnering and battling over inside your point C so that you can hit a new point A. And I think that's kind of the cycle of life and the cycle of different things that Andrew and I like to do. It's like we don't look ahead to point C. We don't look for our next point A. We just simply live point A to B. And through that process and being patient with that process and really kind of diving into that process really makes point C one of the best places to be, because be like, we take breaks in between our seasons, or at least used to. This is the first year we really didn't, because, you know, we don't have any like legitimate work putting in towards the production of our podcast. Like we have all that. We have producers now who do that for us. So like there's no reason to stop if all we have to do is show up and record. Right. So, but before, the greatest part, and I'm definitely going back to implementing this, is like giving ourselves time and just saying, okay, season finale is, you know, some February. You give yourself those like 6 to 8 weeks. That's your point C. What went well this year? What didn't go so well this year? Where do we want to take this thing? Maybe there's some things here that could be expanded upon. Definitely don't want to go back into that. So going through the point C process is massive. And also realizing like sometimes you don't even have to make that big of a change. Point A the next time could just be point A, point 1, you know, A point 1's a little bit better, 10% better than just point A. And I think we find that out a lot with like Boatchella. It's like Boatchella is such a goddamn great idea that sells itself, right? A Coachella themed boat party in the middle of the summer with live music. It's like no one bats an eye at that. People buy tickets to it because they just simply want to be a part of it. Andrew and I don't need to reflect on that in our point C and be like, all right, dude, we got to have Lenny Kravitz headline this year. You like, it's all or nothing, like $30K talent budget or $300,000 talent budget. It's like, you don't have to fight fire with fire. You don't have to make some grandiose thing just because you did something well one time. It's like, well, what if we did it well the same thing, just fine tune the small things that we stunk at the first time and just got better a little bit every single time we did it. And then after 5 years, now we really have something and we can book Lenny Kravitz. I don't know why I'm using it as an example, but Lenny Kravitz fucking rocks. So like,
just find your newfound love for Lenny Kravitz there. The truth comes out.
Exactly. Lenny Kravitz. But like it's that kind of it's made the cherish the point C. Simply cherish the point C.
Yeah, I think that's a really cool perspective is that point C isn't a destination. It's like the recovery period. Again, your workout example, right? It's like
the growing period.
You can't just keep bench pressing. You have to stop at some point and get a drink of water and stop and rest a little bit and recover and then go bench press some more. So I think that's a really good perspective that it's just, there is point B, point A to point B. Point C is where do I want, what's the next point A? So that's cool.
Yeah, and look at point B as your execution mark. Don't even look at it as really a moment in time. It's really what fuels your process. Like to get like a point B is a mere result, but like and obviously the result would be the only having that point B is the only reason a point A exists, right? Like people like to debate results versus process all the time. Like, what do you care more about, point B or the process to get you from point A to point B, right? I mean, both are obviously necessary, but looking like introducing that point C though really makes it makes both just super invaluable.
Yeah. Okay. What do you want to ask me? You said you want to flip it. You got questions?
Yeah. What's it like having 2 kids now? So like you raised one and you went through that process. You had some like point C reflection time and you're like, all right, I'm ready to have another one.
Another one. Yeah. I raised one for 3 years. He's done.
Okay. So they were 3 years apart. Your kids are 3 years apart. Cool.
3 years apart.
And I just want to know, like, what were those things that you like kind of fine tuned for the second time, going into it? Did it get any easier? Was it any, like, what would have been the different things? Would have been the same? What have you learned? I want to know.
Sure. Yeah. It's interesting. Being a parent for the first time is so terrifying because you have no idea. Like you've never done it before. And it's not like I don't know, doing a new sport. Like I'm going to go for a run. Like that's a little intimidating, but it's not terrifying. Everything will be fine. They're literally handing you a human life and then saying good luck, right? Like that's terrifying.
And you own it.
And yeah, it's yes. So the second time is cool because you know what to expect. So it's not like this. It's like when you drive someplace and it seems like it takes forever to get there. And on the way back home, it's like, wow, it was really much closer than I thought it was. It's kind of like what having your second kid is. You're like, oh, I've been here before. I know it worked and what didn't work. To your point about point C, like I had 3 years of my point C of like, well, I do that different next time. So now with the second kid, I get the benefit of all of that. And it's cool to watch the 3-year-old be a big brother to the baby too, which is really fun. Have a full-blown conversation with him and talk to him. He tells you what he likes or doesn't like. He'll be goofy and funny or completely off the walls crazy, but it's just fun to see them interact. So it's cool. And it's been neat. Added benefit of the pandemic, as weird as that sounds, right? My wife, I'm maternal. So this time around, I go in office, I pop down for lunch and I can hold a baby every day.
Sure.
Yeah.
That's just cool. Having a kid in the middle of a pandemic on that, like obviously having that goes about 2. And there's a reason why.
Right. So,
totally. Got to give so much credit.
She gets all the credit, man. And I say that all the time whenever people talk about like parenthood, that as a guy, it gives you doing that. Like, it's crazy.
Given the decision to.
And we knew we wanted to have multiple. Right. And so just like the stars aligned, I'm so bad at the mirroring. But so I had that one line and that was, I'll just apply and use the process.
Totally.
And now here we are. So I use out like what I like, what I don't like, what I kind of want to lean into. And I like with one effort, or just find an idea and pursue it and kind of use this other content like we're doing now as but using it as the research for the book and then write it. And then, this point C and I only wrote one book, right? I want to have multiples.
You're just dialogue on in general, recording a podcast in the Twin Cities. And we with Backpocket, we've had a few sponsors here and there, like more or less like wanting to hit the top 20 in comedy podcasts. And we're in the top 100 in the United States. Now we get these sponsor calls.
Our marketing agency's podcast. And we've bundled all of the services. And now I'm producing shows for clients now. Like I go and record with a plastic surgeon and I'm running sound and producing the show for a plastic surgeon for a wealth management company. We got a couple other people that are coming on. We're all this stuff ready, like preparing for this. So when they ask me those questions, how do we do this? What's the right way? Or what questions should I ask? Or how do I I'm like, I've been there. This is how. And you just,
isn't it fun to know all the answers and they're like, you literally can whip them out. I hate to use the reference, but like you have it already in your back pocket simply because you put the work in before, and it's like effortless in your answer. Like in your answer, the people receiving that information's the best ever. Like Miles is so good at podcasting. Miles just understands it, and they're just like willing to like give you all of this in responsibility and intel simply because you put the work in. And I just think that's such a cool like process of life, and like what a reward. And like something I always tell, because I still work in construction, but like something I always tell like my workers, and when we hit a milestone or something where we, you know, have do something well, and I say, you know what the reward for a good a job well done is? Another opportunity to work. It can be looked at negatively, don't get me wrong, but it's also this idea of like, well, why are you here if you aren't excited to do the next thing? You know? And
it's accountability, like you said too, right?
Right. And I think it's one of those things too, like you work so hard to even get the opportunity that sometimes like you look at the feeling of accomplishing an opportunity or capitalizing on an opportunity that like that's just the end of the day. And I think that's when like that point C really comes into play, where it's like recognizing and realizing that like the point B or that goal or the crushing of that opportunity simply got you to a new place with a new perspective, and hopefully damn well you're ready to find a new direction to capitalize once more or find that next opportunity. Because like if you think about it from like a straight Canada perspective or even Backpocket's perspective, it's like, great, you got a podcast in 6 months from 0 to top 20 in the world. Like now what are you going to do? Like stop recording the podcast, stop strategizing, or like you get that one sponsor and they're like, okay, you got 3 months. You know, it's like, okay, I guess so like it's one of those things where it's like the work's never done. The work is never done. And that's why you just got to like find what you love to do, because you're going to be so goddamn excited to take on that next opportunity as if you're obsessed with it. And I think that's why like Andrew and I never bat an eye at these opportunities we're getting, because we're like, it's another opportunity. We're so excited. This is great. We need to go to the moon with this kind of stuff. And we're accepting of the challenge. You know, we know that there's going to be shortcomings, but at the same time, you know, macroing it out and looking at like where you came from and how this was just all a podcast that started in a dorm room in 2017 to now we're talking about sponsorship deals with Bud Light and sponsorship deals with like people because they legitimately see value in something that you built in 6 months. Like that's pretty freaking cool, man. And you got to be excited to cherish that. You got to be excited on your end, you know, about what this live stream that we're doing with the TED Talk, with everything that's going on. It's like great work, but like what else is there to do?
Right. Yeah. And so for me, I asked the point C question selfishly because I was going so hard on the book and the talk, and then it all ended at the same time. And then we had our baby, and I'm just kind of like, it was like this whirlwind into 2020. And I was left sitting there going, well, geez, what do I do now? Right. It's like, what I've been so focused on getting here. Now I'm here, and what comes next? Right. So I really do appreciate your perspective of I'm in point C, right? Point C isn't a destination. It is asking that question, what comes next? What do I want to do next?
Totally.
And then finding that next point A and doing it again, because you're lucky to have another opportunity, like you said.
Absolutely, man. And I think that's just kind of the process of life to a certain degree, you know, like you don't want to, it's fun to get wrapped up in kind of the goals and the milestones and the different things that you can do, but it's like find happiness in the process throughout, and you're never going to really evaluate or look at one opportunity more than the next. It's more just like, I'm just happy to be here, man. I'm just stoked that I'm even here. And a cool story that kind of goes along with that is a couple of weeks ago I was doing some community service in Tucson because I got a speeding ticket and I'm a criminal. So I had to do some community service to rectify my wrongdoings on Dove Mountain Boulevard. And so anyways, I met during my time out there, I met some cool people. And like, I personally, when I was born, both my grandparents, no, my grandpas died. So my grandpa, I had two grandpas, both died before I ever really met them. But there's one guy that I hold dearly to my heart, and you know, older dude, he's 69 years old. not even really living the retirement life. He's like he's a commercial painter who kind of works for himself and like works his own schedule and like just loving life, works a simple life. And him and I golfed together, and I got to go and hang out with him for the weekend because I was doing some community service in Tucson. And so he had just turned 70, and I asked him, I was like, "So, what's it like being 70?" And he was like, "I'm just happy to be here, man. There's so many times in my life where I cut it close and I thought like it was over or this, that, and the other. Like, I'm just genuinely happy to be here at the age of 70." And I'm like, what an awesome perspective and a great learning lesson for him to just realize like, oh, I'm just so excited to be here. And I'm like happy that I'm just alive. It's like, why don't we all have that, have that perspective, you know, like, I'm so happy to just like be here as a 25-year-old, whatever situation I'm in. You as a 31-year-old dad of two, running this show and writing this book, like, God, you got to be happy to be here. And just kind of having those people in your life or those moments in your life or just finding different ways to realize like, dude, we got it good. No matter what, pandemic or not, we got it great.
Absolutely. Well said, my friend. Well, dude, this is a half Rogan here. We're at an hour and a half.
Yeah, dude. So we crushed. Great work.
Crushed it. Yeah.
First LinkedIn live stream. I hope all the LinkedIners liked it.
It's your first LinkedIn live stream?
Yeah. I got denied from LinkedIn Live, I think. I don't know.
Oh, really?
I submitted. I don't want to say that, but I tried applying a while ago and I had never heard back, or maybe I missed the email that I got in.
Gotcha.
Or whatever, but
well, I'll tell you a funny story about that too when we're done. Otherwise, we'll keep talking. But yeah, dude, you could definitely. We'll get you on LinkedIn Live. There's ways.
Cool.
That's fun.
Cool. Well, right on, man. I honestly appreciate you having me. This has been a freaking blast.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like I could be talking for 4 hours, but I got to stop and get sleep at some point. So where should we send people for more Decky West? I just realized he had Decky West Coast up there, not Declan Brown. Where should we send people for more what you got going on?
Yeah. Yeah. So I would say, follow me at Decky West Coast, DECKY West Coast. Also, you should follow the Backpocket, which is at the Backpocket Podcast on all places. So go ahead and check those two places out. I mean, if you're interested in podcasts in general and what we do, just go to our website, thebackpocketpodcast.com. And we have all of our different podcasts there with the direct links to like iTunes, Spotify, YouTube. Just the Backpocket. Backpocket is one word. You type that into Google, will dominate the SEO. So hit us up. We'd love to, if you're looking to record record your own podcast, start your own podcast, maybe just looking for strategy on how to grow your podcast, whatever it may be, I am of service to you. So just know that. And yeah, man, that's pretty much it. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, man. Thanks for being on. And thanks everyone for tuning in. Thanks to Tom and George for commenting over on LinkedIn. Appreciate you guys hopping into the conversation. And guys watching, be sure to tune in next Wednesday, same time, 8:45 Eastern. We'll be back. This time we'll be joined by the lovely Shoshana Raven. And her thing, Declan, she went from $0 to over $500,000 in revenue in 12 months with her coaching business. Also started with a podcast, her podcast called Living Brave. So we'll get her take on the unseen work that got there. It's going to be fun.
That's badass, dude. Love what you're doing. Thanks for the opportunity.
Yeah. All right, everybody. We will see you next week. Talk to you later.